Okay, good afternoon everyone. Welcome to the final part of the measures and coping strategy session. We have three interesting talks. The talk by Hans de Waal was moved this morning, so we have the talks now by Tiehatten, Verhoeven, and Waterman and Liesting, in that order. Again, I'm going to give you a 2-minute sign at the end of your, close to the end of your timing, so you know that you should wrap up by then. And the first talk in this final session is by Bernardine Tiehatten, How to Reach Societal Impact with Land Subsidence Research. And here she is. Give her a big round of applause.
Thank you very much. I think it's on. Yes. Well, thank you very much and welcome to this sub-session on how to reach societal impact with land subsidence research. I will try to keep my sentences short, so I keep breath and oxygen. My name is Bernardine Tiehatten. I work for the LOS program, Living on Soft Soils, Subsidence and Society. Last time I will say it in full. This is an integrated research program on land subsidence where we do fundamental research and combine it with socio-economic research. If you want to know more about the program, Thursday afternoon, Esther Stouthammer will go into depth about it. Today I will focus more on how to get societal impact of the program. So I wrote a paper together with Esther Stouthammer and Gilles Erkens, the director and co-director of the LOS program. And I am the Trans Academic Interface Manager, which means I try to connect the stakeholders, the non-scientific stakeholders, to the scientists. So get societal impact. It's a program, as you see, it's funded by the NWO, the Dutch Scientific Research Agenda, and with our co-financiers and stakeholders, municipalities, provinces, ministries, but also consultancies. So it's a very, you see, a large group of stakeholders. So in this presentation, I will talk about how can scientific programs go about the challenge of applied research utilization in practice and reach societal impact. So this is what we learned. If you want to do so, and you want to generate long-lasting societal impacts, it's essential to include your partners and to tailor-make your engagement strategies on the different partners. So how did we get there to this? Lessons learned. I will guide you through it, and I'll start very shortly with the land subsidence in the Netherlands. But I think you've heard a lot about it already today, so we'll keep it very short. Next, I will guide you through the method that we use, so the theory of change, the lessons learned, and some concluding remarks. So land subsidence in the Netherlands. I think you've heard it a couple of times. So we have all this peat. LOS focuses on peat, by the way. So shallow subsidence, not the deep subsidence. We have our rural areas, which look a bit like the picture above, and the urban areas where the old parts look like that. But we also have newer parts that look like newer houses. We calculated a couple of years ago that it will cost us about €22 billion if we do nothing about land subsidence, which means we want to do something about it. And that means that we have to make some choices, political choices, policy choices. And in order to do so, we need information, because we want to make good policy. And good policy, we need information to make. So, in the Netherlands, little pause. So in the Netherlands, there are a couple of research programs focusing on land subsidence, and they all have a challenge, mainly implementing the knowledge and practice to reach societal impact. I use this cycle a lot to explain why it's a challenge, because we and you scientists focus on developing knowledge for a greater part. You are very good in publishing it scientifically, but not so good in getting it to use. So the step from utilization, from publishing to utilization, that's a tricky one, and that needs attention. So that's where we're focusing on today. And we are not the only ones focusing on it, because the NWA has as a focus to tackle social challenges and to reach knowledge utilization and societal impact. So they help you. So when when you want to have the funding of the NWO, they help you to tackle the social challenges, so to define them, but also to make a plan to reach them. So reach knowledge utilization and reach societal impact. And they do that with the theory of change. The theory of change, I think for most of you, this part is something you do regularly. So you want to get research questions, an approach, and you to start your research. What NWA say in this theory of change says is those assumptions, those are very critical. So you don't make it on your own, don't only make it as a scientist, but include your stakeholders in writing the plan so that you know which assumptions are made, and you don't find out in the end that even though you have an overall same vision, your assumptions behind these visions are very different. So it's very important to already from the beginning in writing your proposal to include all your stakeholders. The next step is that you actually want to reach impact. So you have the impact pathway in which you have output, outcome, and impact. Zooming in on that, so you have the outputs, outcomes, and impacts. Output is all the things that you as a program produce, so models, data, direct outputs. Outcomes are a bit farther away from your program. So what does someone has to do different with your output to reach a societal impact? So a desired change. Raise awareness or gain support for acting, for example, are impacts. And in order to determine this impact plan, you start with the impact itself. So you start with trying to define what you want to reach in the end. So well-informed decision making is one that we use for loss, because we don't really want to influence policy making, but we do want that they make their policy well-informed. So that's what we find very, very important. But that's not something that we as researchers can actually reach directly. So we need some in-between step, which is the research outcome. So someone has to do something different. That's the outcome. And then you have the outputs. So what do we need to develop as loss to let the outcome reach impact? So we did, as loss, we used it method. I think we were one of the first that that NWO asked us to do this. And we already used it writing the proposal. And during the course of the research, it's now about 2.5 years. So we have about 3 years of experience with the theory of change. And we used our own experience and feedback from our stakeholders, but also from NWO, to define some lessons learned to help us move on, because we have two years to go in our research, but also to help maybe future programs to write a better proposal and use our lessons to make it a bit easier. So this is what we learned. Distinguish between stakeholders. Stakeholders have different focuses, and tailor your engagement strategy. It seems very straightforward, but still brought some insights that we didn't really expect in the beginning. So distinguish between the stakeholders. This is what happened writing the proposal also, because we made insightful what the assumptions were. So in the beginning we thought, oh, we think the same. We have the same sense of urgency. Land subsidence is very important. We all have to do something about it. So let's make a proposal. But going a bit more in depth, we saw that the interests and the needs and the expertise differ per stakeholder. But also, and very important for me, the roles of knowledge development and dissemination are very different. This is looking at these differences. We distinguish about 5 groups of stakeholders. So we have the universities and the research institutes. We have the consultancies, the governments and society, also a stakeholder group. And they all have very different focuses. And looking back at the impact plan, we saw that where universities and applied research science institutes, they of course focus on mostly on output, because they are the ones that actually do the research. Consultancy and governments, they are the ones that have to do something different with those outputs. So they are more focused on outcomes. And then government and society are the ones that provide or see the impact. So these are the different focuses that we experience. And you can see in this figure, they are all very important. So they are all essential in the line from reaching impact from output. So if you miss one of these stakeholder groups, you will miss a chain, and then impact reaching or research realization will be very difficult. So this is what we maybe already knew in the back of our heads, but made explicit by actually writing it down and putting it in the output outcome impact way. Well, that of course means that they all need a different treatment. So you cannot do the same for governments as you do for your applied research science. So you need to change your engagement strategies. You have to divide them, you have to focus them. You have to be not afraid to not only do one big consortium day, but also do field visits with only 2 consortium partners or only 1. So that you can actually talk, engage all of your stakeholders, and they can understand your research better, and they can actually communicate to you what they need to do something different, so to reach the outcome. So you have to optimize and co-create and collaborate. Well, this is what we are doing now. So if in conclusion, we think that the impact pathway and the theory of change have really helped us make a better program, involve our stakeholders better, and I think they will help us in the future, because we still have 2 years to go, and now the results are coming. So now we need to present our outputs maybe a little bit different than we are used to. So no scientific papers, but a simplified Dutch summary, for example. So they actually understand what we are saying. Sometimes very difficult. In those impact pathway and theory of change, we see 3 key factors. So we have a joint statement and articulation. That's all has all to do with those assumptions that I mentioned. The roles and the stakeholders. So be aware that we are not all the same. Try to tailor all your engagement strategies. We are also finding out now that consultancies are a bit harder to reach for us with the current strategies we use. So maybe we have to do something different there. And that we tend to attract generalists. So in these kinds of consortium days or big events, rarely an expert on modeling is present. So how do we reach the more, how do we reach the experts a bit more, so that we can implement the outputs that are not, for example, just the data for a different model, so that people can actually use them, especially for consultants. And of course, you make an impact pathway, but things change. So change with them. So don't be afraid to change your impact plan, um, and use your knowledge and experience to guide you through it. Um, well, of course, this is for a very Dutch research program, but still, I think it's very applicable outside of the Netherlands, because you will always have to, you will always have some kind of societal issue where you're working on, and you always want to have your research used. And also those stakeholder groups may be a bit different, maybe not universities and applied research institutes, but there will always be people focusing on outputs, focusing on outcome, and focusing on impact. So think also useful outside of the Netherlands. And I think within time.
Yeah, thanks very much for your presentation. Sharing the results, how we get to more societal impact with these large research programs. There's time for questions. Any questions from the audience? Oh, yeah.
Thanks for the presentation. I was wondering, as there are also many partners involved in this program, or did you also involve them in writing this impact plan and maybe to cross-check your assumptions and
Yes, they were involved in writing the proposal, but also in the impact plan. We did a stakeholder analysis. Thank you. Yeah, to see which stakeholders are important for the output or outcome or the impact, and we there again try to make insightful what the real interests were. So trying to get over the assumptions, so a bit more in depth on why they were joining the program.
Any further questions? Yeah.
Thank you very much for your presentation. You had mentioned about the applicability to other deltas, and I can tell you in other systems it's certainly true what you're holding, and I've not found the right mechanism to be able to engage well with stakeholders. For instance, I'm an observational geologist, and I find it very easy for me to go back to my sites and still converse with the locals there. But then moving up the chain to be able to talk with them, the higher order of coastal managers, even if we have meetings with them and share some data, it's like it goes into a black box and then we don't know what happens at that point. So if you or anybody in the room has better advice on those kinds of like strategies that might work, I would be happy to hear. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, I think that holds for lots of bigger programs. That sometimes it's very hard for people who don't, for who it's not day-to-day work to work on these kind of programs or data. It goes into a black box. You forget maybe that someone said something to you. Maybe you don't actually understand. You just nodded. So I would say repeating the message. It's one of them, and I think some people in the room have some additions. Make the message very simple and hard to forget, and keep them all together. So what we did in the beginning of the proposal, putting them in one room, it helps because they also talk to each other and recognize each other. But yeah, it's a problem that we also experience.
Want to comment on this or a question? Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and just to add to that, because in the beginning we also had some trouble in getting this program funded. But what really helped and really turned everything was that there was a societal cost-benefit analysis done, and that was presented to our national government. And so then it becomes visible for people what in this case yeah, it's about money in this case, what the costs are. And well, I think those things could help a lot. And of course, you can first start simple with that, and then yeah, make it more complete and more difficult.
Last question? Yes.
First of all, I want to make you a compliment. It is a well thought approach. And I have the knowledge in working in 56 countries, in especially densely populated, vulnerable coastal and delta areas. What is an important small addition, which can be very useful, is to realize that good plans have their roots in the past and are pointing to the future. To take always into account the history of an area. People like that.
Good point. Yes. People like it and it keeps them grounded, maybe.
Okay, thank you very much. We have to continue with the session. Brandy, you may sit down now. Yes, give her a big round of applause.